Perhaps you have enjoyed our interview with Patricia in January, or benefited from her April 10th brilliant analysis of 5 of our speakers. However, strap in and do not miss a second of Under the Magnifying Glass, good to great presentation from District 60's good friend, Patricia Fripp. Take it away, Patricia.
Thank you. I'll never forget the first time I met Larry Mariottini. It was 10:45 on a Tuesday in 1972. I walked into the lobby of this very shishi men's hairstyling salon where I worked, and there he sat looking most uncomfortable. Someone had said to him, "You need Miss Fripp." Well, he didn't know if he needed Miss Fripp, but he was there. Larry Mariottini was a computer programmer at Levi Strauss. I guess you might say Larry was a nerd long before I knew what one was or dreamed I would want to grow up and be one. I took him back to my booth. I shampooed, conditioned, cut, styled, sprayed, and fluffed his hair. He looked good. He wasn't sure he looked good, but he looked good. He walked out of my salon with a bag of shampoo, conditioner, hairspray, hairbrush, never spent so much money in a barber shop in his entire life. And he went back to work at Levi Strauss. As he walked in, all the women said, "Larry." He went home that night and his wife said, "Larry." Well, you can imagine, after a couple of days of positive response, he did feel good. He became a regular client, and as what usually happens when you improve one aspect of your appearance or life or presentation, it has a tendency to spread. Larry joined a gym, started working out, trimmed down, bought some trendier clothes, and acted in a more outgoing way. So much so that Levi Strauss offered him a sales position, even though he had no prior sales experience. Larry Mariottini turned out to be the best salesperson in his division. In fact, they cut his territory 5 times and he still sold more than everybody else. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. This Fripp woman wants to take full credit for transforming not only his appearance, but his life. Well, obviously, Larry Mariottini had something to do with it. However, consider this. As a hairstylist, every day when I went to work, I could look at my job one of 2 ways. Either I have 16 heads of hair to cut, or as I chose to, I have the opportunity to positively impact 16 people's lives. And as we go through our lives and our work lives, if we do it with the focus, how can we contribute to others? Not only do we have more of an impact, we have a greater appreciation for our lives. And certainly in my profession, I have had 2 different jobs. I spent 24 years behind a hairstyling chair, which I loved every second, and then transitioned into a keynote speaking career. And it might interest you to know that how I used to teach hairstylists to cut hair was very similar to how I teach professionals design a presentation. With a haircut, you have to cut an opening guide. And from there, there's really no turning back. Very much like with a presentation, you need to come up with the big idea, the central theme or the premise. With a haircut, you have to make a nice, even balance, the sides, the top, the back, and then You put together the edging and the lining. You run your fingers through the head of hair, and it tells you what you need to do to personalize. Just with a presentation, you have to look at what are your talking points that prove your premise. What is the magic and the techniques that make it memorable? Under the magnifying glass takes a closer look at some of the principles that make a good presentation great. Now, you might be thinking, you used to be a hairstylist. Now you're an honored guest speaker. There's got to be a big difference. And that's very much what 60 Minutes, the TV show, asked me. In the year 2000, they were at the National Speakers Association convention. They interviewed people for days. And then they asked me the question. You used to be a hairstylist. Now you're a motivational speaker. There's got to be a big difference. Perhaps you'd be interested in hearing what I said.
This former hairdresser, like others in the trade, is a born talker.
When I was a hairstylist, I worked on the outside of people's heads. Now, as a motivational speaker, I work on the insides of their heads. There's only half an inch difference.
That line got me on 60 Minutes. That half inch has made me millions of dollars. Not all in the same year. And we are here to look at how do you make your presentation better? And of course, many of our presentations these days, we are on stage, or that's more the past, and now our presentations are behind our computers. However, whether you are in person or online, many of the techniques and principles are exactly the same. If you are beginning your focus on speaking in Toastmasters during virtual times, don't worry. What you're learning will help you. Now let's look at you. We're going to bring up a poll, and what we want you to answer is, do you consider yourself a beginner, intermediate, or advanced presenter? And the good news is it doesn't matter how you identify, because if you're seasoned, if you're an advanced presenter, and I don't see anyone filling in the poll, we would really like to know, how do you consider yourself, beginner, intermediate, or advanced? If you are a novice, you are beginning your speaking, getting off to a good start. If you're intermediate advanced, I promise you, you will learn techniques that will take you to a whole next level.
An important part of being an effective speaker is not magic. It's technique, knowledge, skill, and preparation. This course will provide you techniques for making sure your audience connects with you as a presenter and with your message, the way you meant it. The most important part of this course is to remember it's all about the audience. Yes, I know. You want to be remembered as an intelligent and dynamic presenter. However, if an audience of any size feels you're concerned and interested in them, they will remember you positively.
All right, good. I am seeing here 25% consider you novice, 59% intermediate, and 16% are probably thinking, I should be given the presentation I could do as well as you. Welcome to my first best suggestion. One day, I was working on a project, and I don't know about you, but I am a short-term project person. And I was working on designing my online learning system, which was a really long project. And I was doing my very best to not be distracted. And I opened my email and it said, "Dear Patricia, I am a big fan of yours. May I interview for my blog?" And I wrote up an email. "I'm flattered, I'm honored. I would love to be interviewed. Very busy. Contact me in 3 months." And I thought, well, before I hit send, let me check his website. So naturally, I picked up the phone and said, "What is an Emmy award-winning TV interviewer and game show host doing being my fan? Now that you know that I am terribly shallow." And we had an hour conversation. And it was really, he was a fascinating person. It was a pleasure talking to him. And then he said, "Patricia, this is great. I have enough information for at least 4 blog posts. But come on, tell me, what is the #1 secret of being a powerful, persuasive presenter?" And I said, "Oh, there's no one secret." And then I realized a brand new Frippicism was about to fall flawlessly from my lips. And I said, well, although there may not be one secret, if there were, it would be that your subject is of interest to your audience. And you might be thinking, well, how can I guarantee that my subject will be of interest to my audience? Well, very simply, you need to understand one important principle, and that everyone we talk to is more interested in themselves than they are in us. This is the secret. In fact, one of my first good mentors in comedy was a man called John Cantu. He used to run the Holy City Zoo comedy club where Robin Williams, Paula Poundstone, Dana Carvey, all these great comedians got their beginning. And in his comedy writing classes, he used to say, imagine a gorgeous, good-looking woman walks on stage and says, when I was a cheerleader, and he said, half the audience is going to want to date her, the other half hates her. I want to be a cheerleader. I have fat thighs. He said, what if she walked on stage and said, have you ever been so embarrassed you wanted to, you hoped the ground would open up and you could fall in? Well, when I was a cheerleader, he said, include them in your presentation, connect to them, and they'll laugh at your joke. So one of the major techniques is to use you-focused language. Rather than saying, I am going to talk about what I want to do first. No. It is what you're about to hear, what you can look forward to learning, what you will be experiencing. In your opinion, how often have you? Now that you better understand, and I challenge you to make a list of you-focused language. If you have a presentation, record it, listen to it, and find out how many times you say I, and try and reorganize the sentence. Now, it's not possible to speak and not say I. However, you do not want every sentence to begin with I. See if you can rework it. This is equally true with emails. And what I usually do, I'll take an email, write up what I want to say, and then go back. And rather than I am sending you, before I send it, I will rewrite. Thank you for your interest in. as you requested, you will find my proposal attached. Same information, more you focused. And when we are with an audience in person, it's a lot easier to engage them because we're there, we can get off the stage, we can interact. Whether you are in person and now, especially with more virtual, your you-focused language makes a connection. The first technique is to make your subject of interest to your audience speak as an audience advocate. Let them see themselves in your presentation. You might be telling a story from your life experience, but how about saying, I wish you could have been there. Now, obviously, where you are taking them in this story, they certainly have to want to go there. The second best technique is very simply look at the first 30 seconds of your presentation. Open your presentation with impact.
Welcome to You Have Choices, Options of Openings, the Techniques. As you soon will come to discover, our subtitle is How to Open Your Presentation with Impact. At the beginning of a speech, presentation, seminar, client meeting, report to senior management, sales presentation, or any manner of presentation you deliver, you need to arouse interest in the subject. After all, we stand in the rain to see a movie. Would you stand in the rain to listen to your presentation?
Well, I don't know if you would have stood in the rain for my presentation. However, wouldn't it be nice to believe that we can create a presentation where an audience would stand in line to hear us? This is all the more reason to take a closer look at what you are saying and doing. Everything we do adds to or distracts from our message. So our second principle is open with impact. And remember, the purpose of the opening is to arouse interest in your subject. So let us look at some of the opening techniques. The first one is to begin with a question. And many Toastmaster presentations and other presentations do begin with a question. It might be, have you ever stood up to deliver a presentation and forgot your opening line? Or have you ever walked into a room of strangers you wanted to meet and not known how to begin a conversation? Many questions that we ask in presentations sound that way. Have you ever? And if this is a technique you use, not only the opening, it might be within the body of your presentation, write this one word down. How often? Often is the word. Change one word. How often have you stood up to deliver a presentation and forgotten how you wanted to begin? Oh, several times. Oh, I hope it doesn't happen again. Now they want your advice. If you say, have you ever? Yes, and I lived through it, thank goodness. If you add the word often, they realize, oh, I need to know this because it's happened before and it'll happen again. That's one different. Another question, I personally love a rhetorical question. See if this would work. This is a formula, but see if this would work for one of your presentations. If I were to ask you, is 2021 the year you doubled the quality of your presentations? Perhaps you'd say yes. Perhaps you'd say no. Most likely you would say, Patricia, I would love it to be. Can you tell me how? Well, good news. You're at the right place at the right time. And in the next 45 minutes, you will learn 4 techniques that will help you make a good presentation great. So can you see that is the rhetorical question? And whatever your subject is, if I were to ask you, now the question, the answer has to be a yes, no, or most likely it would be. Now there's an added technique in here. I hope you like my presentation. I hope you remember who I am. However, based on well over 30 years of speaking at conferences, I know very well people love speakers and they don't remember their names. I find as many opportunities as possible to put my name in the presentation. Remember with Larry, somebody said, you need Miss Fripp. If I were to ask you, think of these ways. And if this makes sense, write it in the chat. That's fine. Good. So our first technique, of course, you focus language. Second is arouse interest in the subject. So let's look at the next technique to open your presentation. An interesting statistic or little known fact. A lot of my life, I work with engineers and thought leaders, and within the body of their presentation, they have interesting statistics or little known facts. And I would challenge you to find them in your presentation. And perhaps as an option, bring it up to the beginning of your presentation and begin with the interesting statistic. However, here's the extra technique that makes it good to great. Add an emotion. Would it interest you to know that? Would it surprise you to know that? Would it horrify you to know that? Would it thrill you? I hope you didn't miss much. Suddenly I saw a note I was muted. Did somebody mute everybody? Anyway, I hope we're okay.
We lost you just after, would it horrify you to know that?
Okay, good. Well, I promise I didn't go anywhere close my mute button, but you get the idea, and thank you for jumping in and knowing you can hear. Welcome to the wonderful world of virtual meetings. Add an emotion. It can be thrill, horrify, delight, surprise. This is another way to use you-focused language, because when the audience hears, would it interest you? No. Oh, what? It's a way to engage them. Don't forget to pause for a couple of seconds and let them wait. Make sure the payoff is interesting. For example, I was working with district attorneys, and we were doing this exercise, and one district attorney got up and said, would it shock you to know that San Mateo County is the 3rd largest area of California for modern day slavery? Yes, that is shocking. And I think we need more than interest. That would be horrified, disgust. If it was self-improvement, would it interest you to know that according to the Wall Street Journal, executives who can speak without notes earn 72% more income than those who can't? Now, if you're selling the benefit of speaking, find a statistic like that. Now, that was true. However, it was many, many years ago. I don't know what the statistic would be today. So we have an interesting statistic. We have questions. Now let's look at the next. How about a story or example? Now, our next segment will be on stories. However, as today, even with a virtual audience, and certainly it is easier telling a story when you're looking out in an audience and you're hearing them laugh or smile at you. However, part of developing what I would call an energetic intimacy with your audience virtually, you just have to get comfortable. I imagine you're there smiling at me. You remember an audience that was there. Now you can open with a story, which of course ties into my introduction and the next area about my two careers, hairstyling and speaking. You transition, whatever your opening is, you transition from that logically into the rest of your presentation. Now let us look at the next technique, which is transport the audience. Now you are transporting the audience to a different time and place. There are two ways you do this. If you take them into the future, use the word imagine. It is April 2022. You're about to go out and deliver a presentation at your company all hands meeting. And you reflect for a moment, not only do you have the confidence, the ability, you are in demand to speak at company meetings and outside. And you stop and reflect. I can't remember this happening a couple of years ago. And then you realize it was because of attending a conference in April 2021. And you heard some proven principles on how to take a good presentation and make it great. Will that be the reality? It all depends on how you implement what you learn at this conference. That is taking to them the future. Now you can take them to the past, as I did with Larry Mariottini. I'll never forget the first time I met Larry Mariottini. Now I want to put that into context because if you were thinking, oh, does she still cut hair? That's why her hair looks good. No, I want you to know this was years ago. I know this dates me terribly, but it was years ago. So take them in the past. Another great way to take them back into the past is, I wish you could have been there. Now, I know Toronto is a very technical town. You have you're the Silicon Valley of Canada. And a lot of my life is with coaching engineers and scientists. And the first scientist I worked with was my next door neighbor, Mike Powell, and he worked at Genentech. And this was in the 90s, and he was working on an AIDS vaccine. And I said, Mike, I want you to come and speak to my professional women's organization. However, we don't spend time with scientists. And even if we did, we probably wouldn't know what they were talking about. I want you to open your presentation and tell us, what is it like to be a scientist? He walked up, smiled at the audience and said, being a scientist is like doing a jigsaw puzzle in a snowstorm at night when you don't have all the pieces and you don't have the picture you're trying to create. I challenge you to open a presentation about your job and in as interesting a way as Mike did. And notice what worked. He was comparing what we probably didn't know to what we did know. Being a scientist now also is like doing a jigsaw puzzle. Now look at it even more to understand the power. The words that he was using were visual. Being a scientist, I see someone in a white jacket. It's like doing a jigsaw puzzle. I have an image of my brother and I, because we always, when we were kids, used to do jigsaw puzzles in a snowstorm. I don't know how to drive in snow. And I can remember when I had 3 car accidents in half an hour. Fortunately, not too bad, but I skidded off the road on the way to an airport because I didn't know it was going to snow. At night, the picture changes. You don't have all the pieces. Can you imagine doing a jigsaw puzzle if you don't have all the pieces and you don't have the picture? Try that principle. So we look and make it you focused, to open with impact. And my third best suggestion is, of course, around telling stories. Because whether it's your ideas, your point of view, your product, your service, great stories sell.
In an audience and be mesmerized by a speaker? Was it their compelling content? Were their stories scintillating? Do they have the ability to reach out and grab you in a way you thought, wow, the speaker is talking just to me? Be honest. How many life-changing, career-building, or awe-inspiring presentations have you heard? Have you ever been that speaker? What would it mean to you and your career if you had that ability? I guarantee if you've heard a good speech, sermon, or business presentation that you enjoyed and remembered, at least one reason that made it memorable was the stories. Everybody loves a good story, and that is part of their power. No matter what our culture, we grow up feeling that hearing a story is somehow a reward. Stories are how we learn values and our family's legacy. When we're in school, stories make history come alive. In business, we quickly discover that stories help us explain complex issues and are the best way to connect to co-workers, customers, and audiences of all sizes and makeup. Wise leaders, managers, sales professionals, professional speakers, consultants, trainers, in fact, anybody with ambition who wants to make a difference will do well to develop an arsenal of great stories. These stories will provide clear, dramatic examples. No matter what position or level you find yourself, good stories help differentiate you from your competition. Good stories that are interesting, memorable, and illustrate your message can inspire and motivate, train and teach, convince and persuade. When an audience of 1 or 1,000 listens to your stories, they must find them interesting, have an emotional connection, and find the lesson to be learned from them. It has to be obvious how the story ties to the point you are making at that time in your presentation.
Stories are wonderful to listen to. Stories are wonderful to tell, and they reinforce your points. They simplify the complex. Let's look at some of the principles that might make your stories even better. We understand stories are about people, and our characters speak, and we want to hear what they say. And you might have heard some of the world champs who are my pals or me talk before, when we talk about don't deliver, don't report on the dialogue, you deliver the dialogue. In other words, if I was telling a story and said, I walked into the boss's office and said, boss, I need a raise. I work harder than everybody else and I'm stuck. That is delivering the dialogue. And when you deliver the dialogue, you can add the emotion that the character in the story is feeling. If you report on the dialogue, you said, well, I walked in the boss's office and told him that I need a raise because I work harder than everybody else. Well, it isn't really. A story is driven forward with dialogue. We want to know who our characters are and what they say and what happens. I was coaching a wonderful executive. As I so frequently hear, Patricia, we need you to work with our president. He's not a bad speaker. He's an engineer. He's brilliant. He's shy and modest. And our company doesn't have any corporate rock stars. Can you write him a speech, turn him into a rock star speaker, and you got 4 hours? They always think transformation takes 4 hours. Lucky for me in this case, he was really engaged in the process. And I walked in, we'd never met each other before. And I asked him after, how do you do? If you had one sentence rather than 45 minutes, what would you say? He said, this is a brand new company. I said, good, write this down. Welcome to a brand new company. And my process with executives is I talk to them, I ask them questions, pull their words out, polish them up and pop them back in their mouths. And he was talking about how good their strategy was. And I said, Bernard, when was the first time you learned the importance of strategy? He said, I was a 14-year-old bald boy before the French Open. And people came in to see the match and they didn't realize they had to watch a match with the ball boys first. And he said, I was playing against my best friend and we were equally matched with talents and experience, except in that case, our ball boy was his sister. And she wanted her brother to win. So she was throwing the balls in a way to sabotage my game. And he said, Patricia, that was when I learned the importance of strategy, when you are equally matched with your opponent and you are at a disadvantage. And then he was doing so well. And then he was talking about corporate citizenship. And his speech was getting a little boring. I knew he was passionate about corporate citizenship. And I don't know what you would say, but frankly, when I'm sitting across the table from a man I'd never met, who was probably one of the smartest people I'd ever been locked in a room with, I was not going to say anything critical. So this is what I did. Remember, it'll get you out of tough situations. I said, Bernard, how do you explain corporate citizenship to your children? And he said, Patricia, it was the day after Christmas. And I sat both my children down and said, you're very lucky children, because you have generous parents and even more generous grandparents. And perhaps you would like to take one of your gift certificates or one of your presents and give them back to us. And we cash them in and get the money and give to children who don't have homes. He said, I was so proud of my 14-year-old son. He said, Papa, how much do I give? Because I could give you all of my pocket money, all of my savings, all of my Christmas presents, and it still wouldn't be enough to make a difference. How much do I give? And he said, I told him, oh, you never give it all. You just give enough that it hurts a little. That story took less than a minute to tell. If you had it transcribed, nearly all of it would be within quotation marks. That is delivering the dialogue. Here's a very simple exercise that reinforces an important principle. And that is get into the scene late. This comes from one of my friends who is a Hollywood story consultant, Michael Haig. And his point, and you know this is true, so often of us spend so much time doing the setup to a story that when it gets to the point and the punchline is counterproductive. It ruins the story. Michael says, get into the scene late. And this is an exercise I recommend in your club, in table topics, or just for fun, you come up with something, an idea that is this simple that gives you impact. So for example, if my story was, Mary had a problem. What are you thinking? Who's Mary? What's her problem? Now you give Mary a backstory. Mary was a seasoned HR director. She had run HR departments for 20 years in some of the most prestigious Silicon Valley companies. Now, what do you know about Mary that I don't have to tell you? You know, Mary eats problems for lunch. Mary is the person everyone comes to solve their problems. How do you know that? Because she's seasoned. She's had 20 years experience running departments in these big fancy companies. Then the next line, John walked in and said, Mary, we're being sued for $28 million and I think it was my fault. You've got 3 short sentences. Short. Mary had a problem. She was a seasoned HR professional. She'd worked in departments for 20 years. 3 short sentences. And then John walks in and then the story takes off. It gets to the point. That's what we mean. Get into the scene late. Which leads me to the 4th best suggestion. So what do we have? 1, let us do a review. 1, you focused. 2, open with impact. 3, tell stories with characters and dialogue. And the next technique is, if you want to take a good presentation and make it great, have it transcribed. Don't write it. Deliver it, have it transcribed, and then look to see how close you are to this principle. Specificity builds credibility. What we want to do is look at the quality of your words. This is my #1 pet peeve. And all my clients get a slap on the hand if they say this naughty word, stuff. Stuff is rubbish and debris. What you perhaps want to do, unless this is Christmas or Thanksgiving and you are stuffing the turkey, be specific. You certainly do not want to end sentences, and stuff. You really finish speaking. The next specific way to speak is, if it were not a thing, what would it be? I ask my clients this one question more than any other. For example, one of my brilliant engineer clients, I was helping get ready to speak at a customer conference. And part of the presentation, he said, there are two things people love about. I asked, if they weren't things, what would they be? He said, innovative upgrades. I said, there are billions of people in the world. What people love your innovative upgrades? He said, systems administrators. Can you see the difference in the quality of the communication between there are two things people love about and there are two innovative upgrades that systems administrators love? The next one, and I've heard it on this meeting already, it's not, if it's not fruit, it's not a bunch. You're not going to get a bunch of ideas. You're not going to, you also, so be specific. What do you mean by bunch? Is it a handful? Is it a dozen? Is it hundreds? Is it thousands? By the specificity of your word choices, it's easier for the audience to see. And the next one is, if you can't weigh it, it's not tons. You don't get a ton of ideas. You don't meet a ton of people. Be specific. If you are looking for your good presentations to become great, these are proven principles, frequently overlooked or little known. And I challenge you, if you are really serious about taking your presentations to the next level, record, transcribe your presentations and see how many, well, you might want to go through how many times you underline I in your presentation. Can you rewrite some of those sentences? Open with impact, and you might want to be polite and say, it's a pleasure to be addressing you, or thank you for the opportunity. It doesn't have to be your opening line. Say something to arouse interest before you get into any politeness and your presentation. Stories and specificity make them stand out. Now, I hope at this point you might be thinking, this is really interesting, and I would love to know more from Patricia. And if you would, there are a couple of very simple ways. You can certainly take my ideas, and on my website, fripp.com, there's special resource and blog posts. Or if you want more, take all my presentation secrets. As you heard, my interactive online learning system, you've seen the video, some of the video clips from it in this presentation. Go to Fripp VT, take a trial, get some samples. If you'd like to join, of course, all Toastmasters we are friends. We're all part of the family. Use Fripp to get a 20% discount. Now there, coupon code, if you want to take a picture, you save 20%. You want me to deliver a personal demo for you, send me an email. The same as if you have any specific questions from this presentation, email me pfripp@fripp.com. And then you might be interested on the 15th of May. I'm having a masterclass online, of course, no airline tickets. May the 15th from 9 until 1 Pacific time. We are on a different time zone to you in Toronto. The doors open 30 minutes early for interaction and stay 30 minutes late. You just go to my website and click on events. And if you're on my mail list, you know we have a special Fripp Looks 50 offering. Now, I am not telling you for one moment that I am 50, you know by years of experience. However, this is my social media team. So if you are interested, go to the events page, and your coupon code is Fripp Looks 50. However you write 50, 50 or 50, you get your coupon code. It's true. When I left Wimborne, Dorset, I had no idea what life in North America would be like. I did think that everyone in America was rich and the streets were paved with movie stars. And in my different careers, I have met movie stars and helped a couple develop presentations. However, certainly joining Toastmasters and focusing on speaking has made an incredible difference. And I congratulate you for your interest. I would encourage you to keep going, look for every possible way you can to improve your skills. 15 years ago, I was the keynote speaker at the District 4 Spring Conference. And that is in the San Francisco Bay Area. So it was 50 miles from my house. And I told the Larry Mariottini story. And at the end of the presentation, there was a break, and a gorgeous, good-looking, red-headed district governor came up and said, I used to know Larry Mariottini. Now, in all fairness, you've got to understand, when you tell stories, you sometimes wonder if people see it the way you're telling the story. And she said, he did tell me you changed his life. You cut off his Elvis Presley sideburns. And she said, do you know where he is? And I said, no. And I tried to track him down. And she said, I'm on a mission. I'm going to track down Larry Mariottini for both of us. And would you believe, the very day we had the conversation, his kids put up a Facebook page. We tracked him down, we reconnected. And I said, Larry, how did you really do it? Because now I'm sophisticated, I'm in business, I understand technology and sales, but I didn't then. And he said, because I designed all the inventory systems in the beginning of what was then contact management systems, once you cut my hair and I became more outgoing and had the opportunity, because I understood the technology with the personality, I sold more than everyone else. And they kept telling me, oh, can we promote you? He said, I sold more out of my little office, understanding the technology, than some stores. I didn't want to get promoted. I'd make less money. My final message to you, which came from the conversation with Larry Mariottini: the future belongs to charismatic communicators who are technically competent with good people skills. I have really enjoyed my 3 interactions with your district. I've enjoyed being with you, and I feel like I have a lot more friends. Thank you.